It's just the domain of, like, what do you even call it? Like, people who write dictionaries. What do you call those people? Editors, dictionary editors? Like, it's their domain to be able to define the way words have been used over time. They talk about when they use certain words. So what Tick does is he like doesn't go by just the way the words are typically used, what people typically mean when they use them. He creates these weird semantical traps to, like, change the meaning into something else that more suits what he wants. And then I guess he justifies that by saying it's historical.
Did and didn't say. In response to a recent poll on my channel where the majority of my viewers have said I should talk about politics and economics, which goes against the very vocal minority saying I should stick to tanks, Horatio Pelagius said this: I recently unsubscribed to you, so I'm not sure why this poll has been shown to me, but your political and economic opinions are completely ludicrous, and you don't understand the very basics of the political theory you discuss. Your historical analysis, despite this, is pretty good, and the production quality of your videos is excellent. You do an excellent job presenting them as well. Stick to tanks so I can
Yeah, his presentation is not bad.
Subscribe again and actually enjoy and learn from you. I bring this comment up specifically because it expresses an extremely common view, often repeated by those who dislike what I've said with regards to socialism. He's not the only one to say this sort of thing, but is one of the more pleasant to read examples. When pressed, Horatio then responded, I do take issues with Tick's definitions of socialism because he defines almost literally everything as socialism. It's highly likely you believe in many things that are in fact socialism according to Tick, and are also a socialist as far as he's concerned. Again, this is a very common criticism of my work, but is it true? Did I really say that everything is socialism?
Well, clearly, yeah, because, like, that clip that Fredda played from this video, I'm pretty sure it was this video, was Tick saying that like a publicly traded company is socialism. So yeah, I mean, maybe by the letter, like the exact literal interpretation of those words, he doesn't think that everything is socialism, but yeah, he clearly is using the term incorrectly.
Or did I say something else? Well, in my public versus private video, I explained that the public sector is the state. I explained what the...
So the state and these are the same thing, okay, according to him.
Public sector what?
And the public sector is the state. I agree with that.
Was a societal hierarchy, or a hierarchy of society. I explained that there were...
The term public sector is used to talk about who's financing projects. So if projects are financed by private investors for either gain, like profit, or for just their own purposes, then they're part of the private sector. If they're financed by the state, then they are part of the public sector, because it's public tax money that's being funneled into these projects. The term public sector doesn't have anything to do with hierarchy. That is more what the term state is about. So the public sector is included in the state. It's one of the state's sort of attributes. But, like, this idea of hierarchy doesn't really describe what this term public sector is about.
Numerous synonyms for this structure, from a group to a nation to a society to a public to a worker collective, etc. We can confirm this is the case in reality by simply thinking.
Yeah, but these terms don't all describe state. Like, a nation can be a thing that exists without a state. For instance, the Jewish nation was a thing that people conceived of before the modern nation state of Israel ever existed. And the Zionist project was the idea of giving a nation state to the already extant nation of Israel, which they believed was extant despite the non-existence of the nation state. A social group is not a state. Like my study group for Spanish class is a social group. That's not a state. So these terms don't all fall into, they're not like, he's making a point that like all these terms and this term are all the same thing. But why is he making this point? Like, where did he get this idea? I don't know.
We can confirm this is the case in reality by simply thinking about a tribe. Each hut in the tribe is a
Thinking about a tribe. Let's do it.
Private abode. But collectively, we'd say that this is a tribal state. It doesn't matter what form of governance, if any, the tribe has, be it democratic, priestly, or a monarchy, the fact
As long as it happens to have a form of governance.
is that the tribe itself is a tribal state. It is a society. And when society controls a piece of territory, it becomes political. It forms a hierarchy of some kind, and that hierarchy becomes the state. The same applies elsewhere. A nation is a society, a commune is a society, a workers' trade union is a society, and all of these are hierarchies. So I did say that
I don't necessarily agree with that. I disagree with that. But I think that nation and social group, those aren't states. Like, group, that's not state. Like, some of these terms don't belong in here. And the term public sector is folded into what the state means, but it's not a synonym for state.
And all of these is the state, and that the state and society is a political hierarchy. But what I didn't say was that
Okay. I was gonna read your comment, but okay, it's gone.
the mere existence of a state meant that it was socialism. People took what I said to mean that, but I made it clear, or at least I thought I did, that the definition of socialism was the public ownership or control of the means of production. We'll come back to this specific definition later, but sticking to the wider point for now,
Yeah, but because you think the public means state, that means you think whenever the public or the state does anything, that's socialism, because it's using the means at its disposal to do something. It's the public sector acting with its finances. So effectively, they're right. Yeah, you do think socialism is whenever the state does anything.
public is the state, but that doesn't mean that everything is socialism. It's only socialism when the state or public
Does it? Yeah, exactly.
has control of the means of production.
Oh, the means of production specifically. Okay. I see you. You're throwing a little wrench into my criticism. All right, let's see if you can recover this, because the means of production, that means something very specific, right? You know, that's about how wealth is produced. So let's see if he's gonna stick to this.
So, if we have a state and then a free market, we can't say that the entire nation is socialist. The state might be socialist, their policies might be socialist, and they might be scheming to convert the economy into socialism, at which point we could say that the state is socialist, But if the market is free, if the private sector can operate without public sector interference, then the
But as soon as the public sector interferes, it becomes socialism, and therefore it's not capitalism, and it's not a free market, and therefore you can just chuck the term capitalism out the window, right? That's your opinion? So yeah, effectively, whenever the state does anything, it's socialism. What's your point here? Like, you're on the one hand, you're like, oh no, I don't think socialism is whenever the state does anything, only when they own the means of production. But if they own, like, anything of the means of production, and if they use their influence as the state to interfere in any way with the market, then we don't have a free market, and therefore it's not capitalism. Okay.
The market itself is not socialist.
You want to have it both ways. You want to be wrong and wrong at the same time. Well, okay.
And thus the whole country cannot be said to be socialist, even if the state is. Because this is a major bone of contention, I'm going to hammer this point home by explaining this in a different way. Let's take our example of the tribe again. For a lack of better terms, let's just say that the tribal nation as a whole is called the Purple Tribe. So when I say the word purple here, I mean the entire tribal society or nation, government or not. So we have purple, then we have the individual private huts, and the public tribal state government. Now, let's just say in this instance they have a king who happens to be a socialist. He's running the government.
So this here, the tribal state government, would be the state. The private huts would not be the state. The purple tribe as a whole would be society. So that throws a whole wrench into this previous diagram. Like this diagram directly contradicts this diagram where he puts society as a synonym for state, social group as a synonym for state. All of these groups are all these terms mean the same thing to him, except for when he doesn't want them to, except for when he wants to make a Venn diagram where they're clearly distinct things, where the purple circle includes the state and something else, which he would, I guess, call the private sector. He colors it in blue the same way he did on this diagram. Sorry, I'm just going to go back. There we go.
Yet, we would say that the king is socialist, the government is socialist, but the private sector isn't socialist.
What?
I'd like to point out here the fact that I'm totally blanked on the part where Tick said that in this hypothetical scenario, the king was ideologically a socialist with a socialist agenda. And so because I totally blanked on that, I lacked some of the context for understanding that. And so if I say something in this section that just isn't true or isn't responding to what Tick said regarding that, then just forgive me, because I just happened to not hear that part of what he said. Okay, so that's all I have to say.
What does this have to do with owning the means of production? Let's say the means of production is all controlled by these private huts, and the king demands some tribute from these private huts every now and then. How is the king socialist? He doesn't own the means of production. He merely demands tribute from the means of production. So how is this a socialist institution?
Thus, purple cannot be described as a socialist nation, even if the government is socialist. There's two ways we're using the word society or public, and they're intermingled. Society as a whole is called the public, and the public sector is the state. But while the public might not be socialist, the public sector could be socialist. Now,
in what way would the public sector not be socialist by these reductive models you're using? In what way could it possibly not be socialist? You keep saying that everything, like any way that the state exists or interferes with the market at all is socialism, and then you're like, the public sector could be socialist. In what way could it not be by the models you're using?
You might argue that this is confusing and therefore that proves that I'm wrong, but I'm just telling you what the definitions
No, it's just incoherent. You contradict yourself constantly.
of the words are and how they were used historically and how they're used today. It's not my fault the ancient Greeks, the Romans, and we today have conflated the words public and society with the state. I'm just telling you that's what's happened. Don't shoot the messenger. If I say the word British, am I referring to the British Isles? Am I referring to the United Kingdom of Great Britain? Am I referring to the government of the United Kingdom? Or am I referring to the British public? There's no way to know because we've mashed all those terms together. The only way to know is for me to make it clear. The British government, or the British Isles, or the British people who call themselves British,
Okay.
etc. But just saying British by itself could mean several different things. Well, the same thing applies to the word public. Do I mean the nation as a whole, the people within it, the government, or something else?
Okay.
Exactly. It's all mashed together under the same word. This is how you guys have been tricked. When they say that socialism is when society owns the means of production, you're assuming that to mean that the people or the workers will run the factories together democratically.
That's what the whole point of it was, though. That's literally why they invented socialism. Like, why do you think they invented socialism? This term. Why do you think that people started adopting this ideology? That was the whole point of it. So, what is he getting at here?
Practically. But that's the trick. Your socialist leaders may even encourage you to think that, but in reality the word society has two meanings. One is the people as a whole, and the other meaning is the state. You think it means the first one, but it doesn't. It means the second.
But no, it means the first one. You can't just assert that it means the second one, because it doesn't. It means the first one. Now, it happens that these are not two completely distinct ideas, actually. They kind of mesh together when you have the idea of a democratic state, because then you can argue that actually the means of production are democratically socialized in the hands of the proletariat because they are nationalized, and the government is democratic, so therefore blah 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 blah. And so these two, what you're presenting as two distinct ideas, actually kind of blur. And so, yeah, like, he acts like he's blowing our minds with this shit, but like, he's saying nothing.
Instead of the people running the factories, it'll be the state running the factories, because the state is society. The people are the public, and the public...
He's acting like socialism was from the beginning this like conspiracy, this ruse to be like, we'll say, get this, we'll tell the people that they'll be in charge. We'll tell the people that they're gonna own the means of production. But really, we're just gonna give it to the state. Like, he acts like that is what the original creators of socialist theory were doing, which is just mind-numbingly stupid.
is the state. That's why you've been tricked.
Yeah, you've been tricked. This guy has figured everything out. This guy has figured out the deception at play. He's taken the red pill and he's realized, oh, like, it doesn't take a genius to look at the Soviet Union and say, yeah, that doesn't actually live up to the expectation we were promised by the socialists. It doesn't take a genius to see that, but he's acting like this is some fucking revelation that, like, no socialists were aware of this before he pointed it out. Like, I'm sure the people who are criticizing you already know this basic shit, my dude. You're just not understanding their criticism.
the same thing. The people are the state. Democracy is a state, a form of government. Socialism is state control of the means of production, nothing else. I hope that makes.
But it's other things too. It's like you can have for instance a society in which labor unions, who are not folded into the state in some big corporatist kind of scheme. They're independent labor unions who own the means of production. Or you could have a system whereby just people come together and create businesses that are democratically owned by those members. You can have that. Those are models of socialism that are not run by the government, where property is not directly in the hands of the government. So you're just wrong.
Makes sense, because I'm honestly at a loss as to how to make this any clearer. Like,
I just love his smug idiocy. Like, I am at a loss for how to make this completely incoherent bullshit that I just made up off the top of my head fucking clear to you idiots. How are you so stupid that you're... It's not that we don't understand you. It's that what you're saying is fucking dumb, okay?
really don't know how people are not understanding this and then misinterpreting really basic things that I'm saying. If you see anyone in the comments struggling with this concept...
He's honestly almost kind of giving me Dark Side Phil vibes.
Perhaps you might have a better go at it than explaining it than me, because I've exhausted all my options at this point, and it's a really basic concept.
He knows better. He's got it all figured out. We've had the wool pulled over. We can't believe our eyes. Yeah, it's like, did you guys know that actually in the Soviet Union, the workers didn't own the means of production? You've all been tricked. They got you to believe something that wasn't true. And I figured it out. It's like, wow. The socialists have really been fucking done over, haven't they? This whole time, we were just never aware of the deception.
To summarize this point then, historically, humanity has defined society as the state. Now, I personally don't agree with that statement. I think that it's dangerous. It's a dangerous idea to pretend that the state somehow represents society.
But isn't this the guy who says he's not part of society anyway? So it seems like he does kind of view the term society as bad as well. But I don't even know if that's true, that historically the word society has been conflated with state. I've never heard of that.
Because it doesn't in any way, shape or form. Even in a direct democracy...
Are you guys defending a specific socialist POV, rejecting, just discussing? What I'm doing is rejecting this guy's very specific, like, cum-brained libertarian POV. That's what I'm doing. So, I happen to be a socialist, but in just a very vague, broad sense. Like, I don't have any specific socialist ideology that I believe in. And so I'm not like defending any specific socialist POV. I'm just criticizing this guy for being an idiot.
The state is not society and society is not the state. But that's my own personal view. And when presenting history, I've got to go with how the majority of humanity has defined things. And if the majority of humanity mistakenly believes that the state is society and that's how they've defined it, then that's what I have to say it is. If you think I'm wrong here...
I don't even know if that's true. Like, when he hasn't even provided any evidence that's true. Like, that's actually kind of a big claim that he's making, that historically the terms state and society have been conflated with each other to the point where they basically mean the same thing. I've never heard of that before. Like, that's a thing where if I said that in a video, I would provide evidence, because, like, it's a big claim that not a lot of people would have the context to understand. So I don't have any way to trust that what he's saying is true, because so far, like, everything he said has been total fucking bullshit. So why would he suddenly be right here when I've never heard of this before?
Then it's not me who's wrong, it's society, because society is the one thinking this, not me. The public sector is the state, that's what society says. Socialism is state ownership of or control of the means of production, that's what society says. I didn't make it up, nor do I necessarily agree, but that's...
No, you just don't understand. You didn't make it up, you just don't understand what's being said. Good for you.
What I've got to say, because history is a praxeology, a study of human action. If you...
Okay, this is where he says history is a praxeology.
Another little note, I don't know what praxeology is, and I don't care. I was just thinking about what Fredda said in the video that I was watching before I put this one on. Fredda had something against praxeology. I personally don't have anything against praxeology, but the way Fredda was describing it was like this idea that like human behavior is all down to certain like immutable laws. That doesn't, like, I looked it up on Wikipedia, that doesn't seem to be what praxeology is, so I don't know what Fredda was talking about, and I don't really know what Tick is talking about here, so I'm just like, yeah, just ignore all of this.
Humans have acted and defined something as X, then I can't say it's Z. I have to say society thinks it's X, even if I know it's Z. I can acknowledge it's Z, and I can argue that it's, you know, we should rethink things, but ultimately it'd be wrong to not point out that the majority of people think it's X.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And the best part is...
The first time I've agreed with anything he said in this video.
That the people saying that I was wrong, saying that the public...
But, like, that's not why he was wrong. He wasn't wrong because he did that. He was wrong because he's just, like everything about his analysis is stupid. That wasn't the problem with your analysis, my friend.
Isn't the state... also said that you've got to contribute to society. In other words, they say I've got to pay my taxes, because obviously if we don't hand over all our money to the Play-Dohs, who's going to build the roads? But what do these people mean by you've got to contribute to society?
Well, I can tell you what they mean in a charitable sense. I'm sure you'll give the uncharitable version, but what they mean in a charitable sense is that it's important for people to help each other out. It's important for there to be a system by which everybody contributes something for the benefit of everyone else. And if we don't systematize it in that way, it won't happen. And so that's the justification for taxation, and then using the funds generated by taxation to do public works and such.
Okay, so here's my money and I've got to contribute to society, guys, so who am I forced to give my money to? Do I give it to the beggar in the street? Do I pay my editor, who is a member of society and also...
No, you give it to the system, because the system is really important for maintaining the cohesion and the tranquility and the proper functioning of society. So you do have to give it to the state in order for the state to benefit society. So there is a distinction here between society and state, but I bet what Tick is going to say is that people are conflating society with state. When I don't think that's what they're doing. I think they're saying that the state is the necessary organ for making society function properly, which is not the same thing as conflating state with society. I think this is a dishonest representation of what people are saying when they tell them to contribute to society.
So paying them contributes to society? No, that's not what they mean. When they say you've got to contribute to society, they mean that I've got to pay my taxes. And who do I pay my taxes to? The state. So society is the state.
Checkmate, atheists.
You've got to contribute to society, you've got to contribute to the state. That phrase that the critics use confirms what I'm saying to be true.
No, it doesn't. It's just clearly you reading something into it that doesn't actually exist. You're just making stuff up.
When I explain...
And then creating this, like, funny little syllogism in order to get there. Like, this, therefore that. But there's no logic in the therefore. It's just made up.
That socialism has been defined historically as the public, in other words state, ownership or control of the means of production. I didn't make this up. Many socialists agree that this is the definition. I showed this in the video. I've shown it in subsequent videos, like my Hitler Socialism.
Yeah, there's a reason why people don't disagree that that's the definition of socialism, but they still think you're an idiot. Like, have you not put the pieces together that, they seem to agree with this thing I'm saying, but my conclusion they don't agree with. So it must be that they really disagree with this thing. No, it's they disagree with how you use this thing to get to the conclusion. It's this part in the middle, the logic part, that they're disagreeing with. It's not the thing that you started out with, that term. That's fine. They're not saying that you made this up. They agree with this. It's this part. It's your original contribution that's the problem. Okay?
Video. And I use multiple sources to back up what I'm saying. I'm listing a bunch of these sources at the bottom.
You use a lot of sources that are not actual proper academic sources. Congratulations.
Of the screen. And I'd list even more, but there's not.
Or you'll use primary sources like, for instance, Marx' Communist Manifesto and Marx Engels' Das Kapital, and then just straight up not understand what they say. So, congratulations again.
Enough room. Yet, despite this, apparently, all I used was the dictionary. No, I used multiple sources, including the dictionary. You'll notice that Karl Marx and Engels are in...
Yeah, I fail to understand multiple sources, not just the dictionary. I don't just fail to understand the dictionary. I also completely fail to understand every other fucking primary and secondary source I use. Congratulations.
There too, as is Rosa Luxemburg. I'm not just using the dictionary, I'm using primary and secondary sources too. Another criticism levelled at me in the Hitler Socialism video was that I quoted from Sargon of Akkad in my video. No, I did not. I quoted from 3 socialists who gave their own definition of socialism live during a Sargon of Akkad video. That's not the same thing as quoting from Sargon. Well, all 3 of...
It's fair enough to grab the sort of general tenor of socialism by looking at what actual socialists are saying about it. That's fair enough.
These socialists gave varying definitions of socialism, proving that they didn't know exactly what socialism is, but as I explained, they all actually meant the same thing. When the word...
Well, if they all actually mean the same thing, then doesn't that suggest that they do know what socialism is, if all of their definitions cohere with each other? That doesn't make any sense.
Workers get together, they form a society. Society is the state. So, for example, when Xerxes said that socialism was worker ownership of the...
But society isn't the state. That's not what they're saying.
...means of production, whether he realizes it or not...
But because he didn't say that society equals the state and you're just making that up, then you have this like conclusion that's very convenient for you, but it's not what he said. You're just lying.
That means state control. And
yeah, and that's a lie.
It's this when he says that it's when the workers control the...
You're just straight up misrepresenting what this person believes.
...state apparatus with a Dell computer. Because apparently, according to socialists, we can now run the entire economy off one Dell computer. Finnish Bolshevik and Bad Mouse were the other 2 of the 3 socialists, and are the reason I use this reference in the first place, because my public...
This is my favorite TIKHistory video so far. This one has just been trash from the start. Like, the other ones we reviewed, there were a lot of bad points. They were pretty bad. But, like, there was also some information, some good stuff. This is just a train wreck. This has just started horrible, and it just continues to be nothing but horrible. And that's why it's my favorite.
Public versus private video and my Hitler Socialism videos were both...
Hold on, Sargon's video is still not likely to contextualize socialism properly. At least I think that's a fair guess. Well, I think the point is that Sargon was giving the socialists an opportunity to contextualize it properly according to their own viewpoint. And so I think it's fair enough to look at what socialists are saying about socialism and say, okay, this is generally what socialists seem to believe. I'm going to respond to that. And that's fair enough. Maybe it's not academic, but it's still a social critique of politics, even if it's not like academic theory or anything.
Responses in part to their videos or comments criticising me. I was responding to the Finnish Bolshevik and Bad Mouse as well as many others, so I needed to find out exactly what they thought socialism was. Well, the Finnish Bolshevik defined socialism as the collective ownership of the means of production, which he says is the classic Marxist definition. I agree with the Finnish Bolshevik, who, despite his many other flaws, is actually an honest socialist, unlike many others. Finnish Bolshevik then lists the Soviet Union, China, several Eastern European countries, and Cuba as all being socialist countries. Well, they're all states. Weird that, isn't it? He also, by the way...
They're all states? Well, according to you, everything is a state. Like, what kind of society can exist that isn't a state? Like, according to your... I'm going back to it. According to your weird-ass diagram, the term society is included in this list of terms that are conflated with states. So, like, what's your point? Yeah, of course they're going to be states, because they're all societies.
To pretend that socialism isn't state control, even though it is. So, if I'm wrong, is the Finnish Bolshevik also wrong? Are all the socialists who know socialism to mean the state ownership...
No, you just don't understand anything. Including Finnish Bolshevik, probably.
...the means of production, also wrong. But note, I did not quote from Sargon himself. Not that that would really matter if I did, but I actually didn't. So the criticism is completely...
Yeah, it kind of would matter if you did, but okay.
...wrong. Nevertheless, the criticism was there. LMAO. This naughty nerd cited Sargon of Akkad and Timcast as sources.
I still want to see the Timcast citations.
Others asked why this was an issue, and user Paid Government Shill said... They're both cretins who don't have a clue what they're talking about. Marx and Engels are both cretins, but we're allowed to quote from them. Hegel is an emotional contradiction, but that's fine apparently. However, we'll just ignore those facts. Well, it's good news for Tik, since he was in fact citing Bad Mouse, Xerxes and the Finnish Bolshevik, not Sargon. So if we're going to dismiss sources on the basis that they're made by...
I mean, yeah, this is just a pointless discussion. Like, oh, he's cite... Like, this person was an idiot for saying this. So I agree. I agree. The moron was a moron for complaining about a moronic thing. Let's move on to Tim.
I don't agree 100% with Sargon or Tim Pool, but even so, I don't think it's right to dismiss their arguments. And in the case of Tim Pool, I wasn't quoting from him either. I was quoting from a news source that he displayed in his video.
He's displaying the Daily fucking Wire. I mean, is that any better than just quoting Tim Pool? Like, think, man, think. Like, is the Daily Wire... what is this article? SpongeBob SquarePants is a violent, racist colonizer, college professor says. I mean, okay. I guess it depends on what TIKHistory pulled from this video. I don't know what TIKHistory was quoting from this video. Or why people are criticizing him for it. I don't know, like the I guess, like, saying that TIKHistory used Tim Pool as a source. Yeah, that sounds bad. But, like, the more I'm looking at it, the more it's kind of seeming like maybe it's kind of an overblown criticism. But I will say that I don't think using the Daily Wire is any, like, better than just using Tim Pool.
Why? Because it was through Tim that I heard about this issue, so I wanted to give him some credit for covering the topic. Tim, like me, is someone who abandoned the left. These lefty critics of mine and Tim's might want to ask themselves...
I mean, Tim was hardly even on the left to begin with. And then he abandoned the left, but he's too much of a pussy to call himself a conservative. So he's still calling himself a liberal, a moderate liberal.
Why we abandoned the left. What was the reason we...
What are we saying here? If me, Dirt, and Tick were in a group, in a state of nature, and we voted democratically on everything we decided to do, we are state and society. How much can we scale until they are not? I don't exactly know the point being gotten at here, but perhaps you'll explain.
We decided that socialism wasn't what it made itself out to be. Maybe if you started listening to us, you would understand. But going back to the larger point, there's plenty of socialists saying that socialism is state control of the economy. Rosa Luxemburg said, "Socialism means the striving of the proletariat to bring about the dictatorship of its class in order to get rid of the present form of production."
Yeah, I do think that generally state socialism was the model that people used back in the day. That was what they understood socialism to be. But there's diversity in the analysis. But yeah, typically people, I mean, especially people, Marxists like Rosa Luxemburg would feel that way. A central idea within Marxism is this idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat, where the proletariat knocks the bourgeoisie off of their kind of monopoly of capital and power, and they create some sort of a government, whether it's democratic or not. And this was kind of the sticking point, that would be a socialist government, and the sticking point is that, like, if it's democratic, then wouldn't that mean people could, like, vote for not having socialism? Which kind of throws a big kind of question mark into the whole idea of socialism in general, which I think is perhaps one of the reasons why a lot of people became anarchists instead of Marxists, because that was the big issue with the First International, is that there actually was a lot of disagreement with Karl Marx, and those people sided with Mikhail Bakunin instead, who didn't believe in this. I mean, he's just straight up didn't believe in this dictatorship of its class thing. He was like, that's wrong. We don't want that. That's the bad way to bring about socialism. That's not going to bring about socialism in the way you want it to. So it's not like Rosa Luxemburg's idea of socialism is kind of like representative of all strains of thought at the time. It was just one very popular strain of thought at the time.
She wants to form a dictatorship over the economy, the state ownership of the means of production, and calls that socialism. But no, Rosa girl, you're wrong. The lefties who worship you, who have been misled by their statist teachers into believing that socialism is when there's puppy dogs and rainbows, says you're wrong. So you are, girl. There.
Yeah, it's just totally simplifying the complexity of socialism right here. Like, just not knowing the history of the debates about this subject, the various internationals that occurred, the 1898 crisis of Marxism, just like ignoring everything about the history. Yeah, what a great history channel, just ignoring all history in order to create propaganda. Beautiful.
Then you've got the Labour Party manifesto of 2017. For the many, not the few, apparently, because this is now Star Trek. The Labour Party is the
needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Or the one. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty pretty socialistic idea, I guess. Here's this cartoon. Ever hear the phrase, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? Yes, it sounds very good until you're designated as one of the few. I guess so. But I mean, like, that's a very uncharitable way of interpreting it. Again, like you can take this and then like look at the literal meaning of the words and like come up with a situation in which like that doesn't make sense. This is the same way that people criticize utilitarianism. They'll like come up with some fucking scenario in which case like, oh, if it benefits the most people the greatest amount, and it's still fucked up. That totally discredits utilitarianism as a concept, and it's like, okay, but like you're having to like go out of your way to be a pedantic dick in order to criticize what's really just a general principle of philosophy, like a general method of informing how we view the decisions we make. You know, it's not meant to be like down to the gnat's ass every single time. This is exactly the sort of pedantic behavior that you see from all these smart asses in philosophy who I just find so irritating. And that's a big part of why I don't like a lot of Western philosophy, and I don't really respect philosophy all that much in general, just because a lot of it is just pedantic like this. Statist is a bit like the N-word to libertarians discussing anyone else. Yeah, I guess. Or it's their version of fascist, because the lefties will use that word, fascist, to describe everyone they hate. Libertarians, it's statist.
International Socialist Party of the UK. Many basic goods and services have been taken out of democratic control through privatisation. What does this mean? Democracy is when you vote for the state, giving the state power. So, the Labour Party are saying that goods and services were taken out of state power via privatisation. So they want to bring private rail companies back into public ownership.
They believe in nationalizing industry. That's a part of their socialist agenda. This says nothing about the nature of socialism being entirely wrapped up within the state structure. So he's like using this one example of a socialist manifesto and being like, see, all socialism is like this. No, that's not how it works. And even like if you were to talk to these Labour Party members, a lot of them would really agree with and support other versions of socialization, like the worker cooperative model. Like, Bernie Sanders put in, he offered up legislation to create like democracy in the workplace, giving workers, giving like the average employee a say in what goes on in the business, not necessarily owning the business, but giving them a say. That is very much a socialistic idea that is not run by the state. It's not like a state. It's state mandated, but it's not like democratically controlled by the fucking structure, the superstructure of the state, the institution of the state. That's not the institution that's getting power. It's the people who work for the company who are getting power in that situation via that mandate, which of course is a state mandate. So Tick would just take that and run with it, wouldn't he? He'd be like, it's all the same. It's not all the same. Shut the fuck up.
Well, they used to be nationalised into the state, so they want to bring them back into public state ownership. So there you go, we have a direct quote from the Labour Party, the supposed Workers' Party of the UK, more like the Shirkers' Party of the UK, using the word public to mean state. Reverse the privatisation of Royal Mail at the earliest opportunity. Again, Royal Mail used to be in state control, and they want to reverse the privatisation and make it state-owned again so they can read our mail. That sounds like public state ownership or control of the means of production to me. You've got Rosa Luxemburg.
So that they can read your mail? Is that what you're concerned about? Is that really a legitimate concern, that you think they're going to read your mail when it's state-owned? I don't know enough about the whole Royal Mail controversy to... Like, were they doing that when it was a state-owned company or service? I don't know.
Okay, Karl Marx, numerous other socialists, the Labour Party, loads of dictionaries, a colossal amount of history books, all saying that socialism is the public state control or ownership of the means of production. There's a convergence of evidence all pointing to the same definition. But when I say this, apparently I'm wrong. No, you're wrong if you think socialism is anything other than state ownership or control of the means of production.
Yeah, when you conveniently ignore everything to the contrary and you only focus on the stuff that supports your own conclusion, then it's very clear that your conclusion is correct. This is Tick's whole modus operandi. Like, this is how he does everything. Just ignore everything to the contrary of what he wants to believe, and then spam you with a bunch of shit that confirms what he believes, and then he's like, see, I'm just the messenger, guys. It's like, no, you're the curator of a clearly biased worldview.
It's not when two workers hold a hammer or when two girls share one cup. It's when there's a totalitarian state in control of the economy. It's not when...
Now it's a totalitarian state, specifically. He just sneaked that in there, didn't he? He sneaked... He thought we wouldn't notice that he's just introducing this whole new element out of nowhere with no explanation. Okay.
Money has gone away... No, it's not. It's when the state is in control of the economy, regardless of what that economy looks like. If you think it's anything other than this, you have been tricked. You have been lied to. When I was a socialist, I knew what socialism was. The difference was that I was also been tricked into believing that if the state did stuff, it was good, and that when the free market did stuff, that was bad. Who taught me this? State minions in the miseducation system. Now I see reality. The free market...
Now I see reality, man. Yeah. The fucking transnational corporation that doesn't exist in any one country and always seeks the best deals at the biggest cost to the worker and exploits third world slave labor in order to make its goods as cheap as possible. That's where it's at, man. That's the pinnacle of what we can do.
Is good, and socialist totalitarianism is bad, unsurprisingly. Now, going back to Horatio, he said, "Forgive me if you've changed your mind on this, but I've heard you define a private business as owned by an individual or a family, and that's it. How does this correlate with historical definitions? Which political theorists are there who..."
Dude, I am excited to see what back-ass bullshit justifications he comes up with to figure out a way to make this make sense. I am so here for this.
Would define Apple or Tesla as a publicly owned business because it's publicly traded. Okay, here's a quick Google search for what is a share. Investopedia says shares are units of equity ownership in a corporation. Wikipedia says a share is an indivisible unit of capital expressing the ownership relationship between the company and the shareholder. Hargreaves says a share is...
Yeah, I think we know what a share is. Can you get to the fucking point?
Simply a part ownership of a company. When a company is listed on the stock exchange, the shares have a market value and can be bought and sold. Knee Business Info says...
God, nobody fucking cares. Like, everyone knows what a share is. Move on.
Shares represent become one, if not thousands of results.
Okay, we get the point.
Something that's publicly traded is publicly owned.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I told you I was excited, didn't I? To hear his justification and what it would be. This is perfect. So, because something like the term publicly traded kind of sounds like publicly owned, and they kind of, on a very literal basis, divorced from any kind of like inherited like social meaning, like any kind of contextual meaning. When you strip it of all like historical meaning, these terms publicly traded and publicly owned kind of mean the same thing. Because of that, they are the same thing, and any actual like an analysis of the way the terms are really used by people who actually have been using these terms for hundreds of years doesn't matter. We can just throw all that out the window, because wow, that's fucking big brain thinking. That's some real great original contribution to political theory you've made here. Tick History, wonderful.
Let's take Amazon as an example. This article.
Let's skip this part because I already know what he's going to say.
Marx shaking hands with Wall Street bankers and corporates. They are one and the same. Karl Marx was doing the bidding of Wall Street. He was calling for the shared ownership of the means of production. More power to the corporations, also known as syndicates.
What the fuck? He's doing it again. I can't believe it. This guy doesn't understand how the English language works. This guy is a total fucking moron. Like, oh my god. Like, I'm astounded. He's doing it again. I thought this was like a weird little glitch in his brain in the last video where he was saying that like corporations and like the fascist meaning of corporations, like the syndicate, were the same thing. I thought that was like he had a weird brain like aneurysm that just disrupted his ability to make logical connections in that video. No, he actually thinks that. He actually thinks that they're the same thing. That like this version, that like the labor union version of corporation is the same as like the publicly traded company version of corporation. He thinks that they're the same thing. I bet he thinks, dude, this is the same thing that Son of Tiamat did in that video about fascism they talked about, where he quoted the liberal fascism book. He was like, but wait, you can make the argument that fascism was corporatist. Well, you know, the New Deal was also corporatist. You know, FDR worked with corporations all the time in the New Deal era. It's like, that's not the same version of corporatism. It's like a totally different meaning of the word. When people say that America is a corporatist country, they're using the term corporatist to mean crony capitalist, which is a totally fucking different concept from syndicalist corporatism. I can't believe there are two of these guys. There are two of these guys, these chuds, who do this, who conflate meanings of corporatism and corporation. Like, this is amazing. This is amazing. This is just baffling stupidity. Wow. I am impressed.
Syndicalism or corporatism is a left-wing ideology. I wonder why. Going back to Horatio, he said that I was wrong because nobody defines Apple or Tesla as a publicly owned business just because it's publicly traded. But they do.
No, they don't. That's why you're wrong. You're wrong because this connection you're making is not actually used by people in real life. It's just a weird, like, semantical kind of like trap that you've created in order to justify your position. It bears no reality on anything that actually exists. People don't actually talk this way. People don't actually use these terms in the way that you are using them. This is like a weird thing that only you do. Okay? This is you only. So what this guy Horatio is saying is that people don't use these words in this way, so it's erroneous to do that. Which is it's ironic because that was the point that he was making earlier. He was like, if people use these terms historically to mean a certain thing, then I have to acknowledge that they mean this thing, even if I think they should mean something else. Like that he made that point earlier in the video, and now he's directly contradicting that point by failing to do it here. Wow.
Owned and publicly traded are the exact same thing as every...
The whole foundation of his argument is Terrence Howard-esque. I don't know who Terrence Howard is, but he sounds like a big brain genius.
Source in the world says so. When you buy a share, you're buying shared ownership of the company. I don't know how you didn't know this, but you didn't.
I love it. He keeps doing this. He keeps being like, I don't know how to make it any clearer. How do people not know this stuff? Like, wow, the density. It just goes over his bald head completely.
And you're not the only one. This is a very common criticism of me, that I said that corporations are shared ownership of the means of production. Which it is, but apparently people didn't realise this. And then you and all these other critics have the nerve to say that I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, I think you'll find that I do know what I'm talking about. I think you'll find that my political and economic opinions are not opinions. They're facts, and aren't completely ludicrous as you claim they were. I think you'll find that I do understand more than the very basics of the political theory I discuss.
No, you understand less than the basics. You fail to understand the most basic aspects of political theory. My guy, like, you're not even on that level, okay? You're not even on that level. So don't even pretend that you can even pass that level, because you haven't made it there.
It is, in fact, yourself that is wrong, who doesn't understand the basics, who didn't even know what a share is, and you're not the only one. Lots of people criticising me also did.
Dude, this is deluded. The guy, Horatio, said absolutely nothing about the definition of share here. He said that Apple and Tesla are not publicly owned just because they're publicly traded. This has nothing to do with the definition of share. And then he's like, you don't even know what the definition of share is. It's like, nobody said anything about that.
You were. This is what frustrates me. People wonder why I get frustrated and annoyed or respond to the trolls. These aren't trolls. Horatio is not a troll. Horatio has got a misguided view of the world. But the frustrating thing is that the critics like Horatio are so adamant that they're right that they'll dismiss all the evidence. They'll dismiss everything I say, they'll unsubscribe, they'll spout lies about what I said, they'll claim I didn't know.
No, they're simply bringing up stuff that you've ignored. You're the one who's dismissing evidence. Like, we get your evidence. Like, it's not hard to understand the points that you're making. But there's like other stuff besides that contradicts what you're saying that you're just conveniently ignoring.
Know anything about what I was talking about, which is all not true. I do know what I'm talking about. Horatio is the one who's wrong here, as are a lot of other critics.
Just the malding cope with this fucking pathetic human being. I bet if he read Plato's Republic, he'd call him a statist socialist. Oh, no doubt he would. In fact, didn't he reference Plato earlier? He called the state like a bunch of Platos. Did I hear that? I feel like I heard that. Terrence is the guy from Iron Man on Joe Rogan last month who has astrophysicists the world over telling him why 1 × 1 = 2 is not the secret to the universe. Yeah, that's this guy, for sure. Same level of thinking.
Yet somehow I'm the one who gets this reputation that I don't know anything about politics and economics. But it's not me, it's them. They don't know what they're talking about, but somehow they've managed to project their ignorance onto me. They don't know, so they accuse me of not knowing, even though I do know. It's just frustrating.
Dude, this is like... Okay, I'm trying to come up with a good analogy for this. TIKHistory is basically a guy looking at a bunch of rectangles, some of which are squares. And he says, all rectangles are squares. And then people are like, what about these rectangles that aren't squares? And TIKHistory is like, do I have to run it through for you? Okay, idiot. Look at this rectangle. Is this a square or not? Obviously, it's a square. Now look at this rectangle. Is it a square or not? Obviously, it's a square. And he keeps doing that a few times, and he's like, see? Every fucking rectangle I've shown to you is a square, so why don't you believe me? How are you not understanding this basic shit? And it's like, but you're ignoring all the rectangles that aren't squares. That's the problem. Like, that is the level of idiocy I'm dealing with here. It's that bad.
In mind, it's not just the critics who think corporations are private entities. I've read books and have heard Austrian economists refer to corporations as being capitalist.
Yeah, and you just the same Austrian economists who you're so quick to reference when talking about socialism, something that has nothing to do with Austrian economics, really. You're then skeptical of them when they talk about capitalism, which is in their wheelhouse. That's wow, what great selective reading you're doing.
Love for someone from the Austrian camp, like Tom Woods or whoever, to dive into the...
Hold on, we have Terence misunderstands the word multiple, yet everyone is overthinking the reason he's getting it wrong. This guy and the words public and state are the reason I compared, or multiply rather. Interesting.
Sources and verify whether what I've said in my videos are right or wrong. I want to know for absolute certainty that if socialism is social ownership, why are public corporations that are socially owned by their shareholders classed as being private?
Okay, this is an actual question, and I'll give you an actual answer for it. It's because the thing is that what we're dealing with is a separation between the laborer and the product of his labor. We're dealing with what is called in Marxism alienation. The laborer is alienated from the profit that he is creating, and the profit is instead going to other owners who own capital, even when they don't necessarily contribute to the management of it. They own it still. That's in the case of a publicly traded company. Now, you can also have owners who are involved, both in public and private companies, owners who are involved in the administration of that capital. And they would, of course, have a natural right to some of that profit. But it's just the opinion of the socialists that because they are hogging all of that profit, and only giving a wage or a salary that of their choosing, that's not like a proper dividend from the actual what is generated of the wealth. There's a separation there where the worker is not enfranchised at all in this system, and everything is up to the discretion of this sort of management class within the company, and the worker has no say on anything. And so, yeah, it's the people who own have this sort of private control over something that, in the opinion of the socialists, should be actually controlled by everyone who is involved in the generation of this wealth.
Is it not shared ownership? Then what's the point of a share of ownership? Maybe someone...
Is there any philosophy in that bookshelf? I don't know. It looks like it's mostly history stuff, World War II stuff. A lot of books on Stalingrad. Wow, this guy must know a lot about Stalingrad, because he has a lot of books that are just called Stalingrad.
One can ask around for me and get a response from someone like Tom Woods, because, well, that would be awesome. Horatio then says, you have widened the definition of community to include everything that isn't a family, because that's politically convenient for you to do. Why isn't a family...
My bookshelf. Yeah, there's some philosophy on here. I haven't read much of it. There's Leviathan, there's Marx, there's Kierkegaard, either or. There's, I think, that one dude, the French guy. I'm not narrowing it down at all. I can't remember his name. There's probably a few others. I sometimes will, if I see a philosophy book for cheap, like at a book sale, library book sale, I'll pick it up.
Family a community? How isn't a family-owned farm not actually a mini socialist state, just like Apple or Tesla? Okay, Horatio.
I don't think it's Sartre. It's Camus, that was it.
Let's just pretend that a family-owned farm or business is socialism now. So, are we all living in a socialist paradise? Because all the family-owned farms and businesses exist, so it must be socialism, right? Oh wait, no, because that's stupid. Are you seriously suggesting that a family-owned farm is a socialist state? I mean, it's simply ridiculous. And what you're essentially asking here is, why isn't a village a city?
Okay. I must have missed some crucial context here. So let me read that again. You've widened your definition of community to include everything that isn't a family because that's politically convenient for you to do so. Why isn't a family a community? How isn't a family-owned farm not actually a mini socialist state just like Apple or Tesla? Well, he's not saying that it is. He's saying that under your logic it should be, and that you've arbitrarily excluded family from this list, this long list of words that you have identified with state, which we can repeat them. Here, the public sector, the nation, the society, the social group, the collective, the commune, the group, the state. The point that he's making is that you have, for no fucking reason, removed the word family from that list. And he's like, why? Why did you do it? He's not saying that family-owned farms are socialist states. This is like such an idiotic misunderstanding of this guy's point.
That's stupid. Are you seriously suggesting that a family-owned farm is a socialist state? I mean, it's simply ridiculous.
No, he's not.
And what
He's
you're
not
essentially
saying
asking
that.
here is, why isn't a village a city?
It reminds me of iDubbbz's content cop on Leafy Is Here when he played this clip of Leafy saying, dude, is this person fucking retarded? And it was clearly someone with Down syndrome, and iDubbbz was like, yes. And then he played the clip again. Dude, is this person fucking retarded? Yes, she is retarded. What do you want? Do you want a fucking medal for figuring that out? Yes, she is retarded. That's what this reminds me of. It's like just the silliness of it. It's just so silly.
Well, the reason a village isn't a city is because villages are smaller than cities. There's less buildings, less people, less infrastructure. Villages aren't cities for the same reason that families are not socialist states. They're too small, and you can't have
They're
socialism on the family level. If you
What an arbitrary distinction. It's small? That's the only distinction you make?
could, then just go away and implement socialism and leave the...
I mean, you literally can have socialism on the family level. Like if you run your family farm like a socialist institution, you can do that. Like, there's no rule saying you can't. Like,
rest of us alone. Historically, a family was defined as something smaller than a community. In fact, I showed precisely this in the public versus private video. A family would merge with others to become larger families. In ancient times, these were known as gentes, which is where we get the word gentleman from. In other words, families would get bigger until they became noble families in the hierarchy. Above this, you would then have the fratria or curia, fraternities or brotherhoods.
Dude, nobody cares. This is totally irrelevant information. He's just trying to sound smart here. Like, he's trying to sound smart, and he's trying to justify this with, like, historically, family is something smaller than a community. And it's like, well, not historically, just in fucking common usage, the word group is very often something much smaller than a state. So why is the term group included on this list of states, but family isn't? It doesn't make any sense. It's almost like he didn't think this through. Wow, what a
is somehow
shock.
socialist. And that's fine, but that's not what it was historically. And I would also say it doesn't make sense to call it that. It's too small to be classed as a community by itself. Private property means an individual or small family property, not communism. So even logically, it doesn't make sense to say that a family is a communist utopia. It's not because
God, he's still okay.
it's politically convenient for me to say this, it's because that's just the way it is in reality. I'll try to be brief, as I'm on a
I love how most of this video is just him responding to this totally reasonable criticism from Horatio Pelagius. And just embarrassing himself over and over and over.
mobile, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds on this, but the heart of social ownership is ownership by the community in which it operates. State ownership is not automatically social ownership, as the state may not necessarily be a legitimate representative.
I wouldn't agree with that. I think that's if there are socialists who would say that, but I think that's narrowing the tent for what counts as socialism too much. You can say it's against the spirit of socialism, but I wouldn't say it means it's not socialism if a state isn't democratic, because then you can argue, well, what technically is a democratic state? There are various different levels of democracy. What counts as democracy? Like, is a democratic republic where corporations, and I'm not talking about syndicates, I'm talking about publicly traded companies, okay, Tick? Don't confuse them. I know they're very easy for you to confuse with each other. But is a democratic republic where publicly traded companies have a lot of influence on the government? Is that democratic? There's a lot of ways you can split hairs here, and so I think it's kind of pointless to do it like this, where you're like, well, state ownership is not automatically social ownership because state may not necessarily be the legitimate who are you to say what's the legitimate representative of the community? It's just your opinion.
Representative of the community. If it isn't, then the community has no claim to ownership of state assets. Okay, so there's a couple of points here, and again, he's certainly not the only one to say this, just one of the more recent ones. So, the first portion of this assumes that state ownership is not automatically social ownership. Yes, it is, because the state is society, as explained before. I'm not going to labour over this point, we've already been over it before, but he says the state may not necessarily be a legitimate representative of the community. It isn't a legitimate representative of the community. It never will be. Democracy is a lie, it's snake oil. And this is where I disagree with Mises, who was pro-democratic, at least in his early years. No, the state isn't and cannot be a representative for me. It might claim to be, it might pretend to be, but it isn't. That's my entire point. The state is not me, even though it claims to be, and even though the language says it is. They say that the state is society, and because I'm a member...
Now we're just getting into his libertarian cum-brain spiel. Let's suffer through it.
...of society, therefore I have to contribute to society. Except I'm not a member of society. The state is not.
And this is the silly clip we made fun of earlier when we were watching Fredda's video. I'm not a member of society. I, the guy who's living in a house or apartment that was built by other people, that's lit by electricity generated by other people, who drinks and bathes in water that's funneled to my house by other people, who eats food that was produced by other people, who went to a university and got a passing grade of C minus on mediocre work that was graded by other people so that I could get a job working with other people in order to make my money, am not part of society. Genius, just fucking genius libertarian intellect right here. He figured it out.
Society, even though it claims to be, and therefore I don't want to contribute to society, the state. However, historically, the state has claimed to be society, and the language represents this because people have mistakenly believed for millennia that the state is society, and you've got to contribute to it with tribute, peasants. I can't change that, unfortunately, but I can point it out, which is what I'm doing. You say if the state isn't a legitimate representative of the community, then the community has no claim of ownership of state assets. Correct. And the best part is,
he's a believer in Hoppianism. What is that?
This is exactly what socialism is. Socialism is a lie. It promises you something it won't deliver. You think that socialism will benefit,
I mean, I kind of agree about that.
the workers or the common man. No, it's designed to trick you into voting in totalitarianism. It's not a legitimate representative of you or I, despite calling itself a democracy. It's lying to you. The ideology is designed to trick you into believing the lie.
No, it's not. It's not some big conspiracy of secret fascists, or I guess fascist isn't the proper word, but secret authoritarians. It's not like some big fucking conspiracy created. Like, it's not like Marx was sitting there like, how am I gonna trick these fucking idiots into voting for authoritarian government? I know, we'll just tell them that they're being liberated. Or I guess Marx was not a proponent of electoralism, but you get what I'm saying, like, install an authoritarian. How do I get these simpletons to vote or revolt against their own interest? I know, I'll create this thing called socialism that'll really just be a ruse. It's like, no, that's not that's not what happened.
The red pill is waking up from the matrix and seeing the world for as it really is. That's what you need to do now. You need to realise that socialism, communism, whatever, are all lies designed to trick you into enslaving yourself.
God, the absolute demagoguery of a guy who claims to be like a history channel, just getting on this soapbox saying some fucking insane hogwash. Like, I hope this isn't how I sound when I make my videos. I hope I at least sound like I'm trying to give the other side the benefit of the doubt, you know?
Just wake up. You can like or dislike
Wake
social
up,
ownership.
sheeple.
That's not the point here. Correct.
Take the red pill. The everyone who has this kind of wake up, take the red pill rhetoric, it's just so funny because they think like the fact that they've come to a certain conclusion based on their life experiences and the things that they've learned, and the fact that this conclusion happens to disagree with the way a lot of other people think, they think that means they're like some fucking maverick who's like his eyes have been opened in a way that other people's just haven't. Like, he can magically see things that other people can't. It's like it's a level of like self-importance that is just so fucking stupid, and it's so like megalomaniacal. Like, you have to think that you're some fucking genius in order to use this kind of red pill rhetoric that I see all the time. And conspiracy theorists love doing this. It's so silly.
The point is that you can't just define it as something that it isn't. I've not done that.
Hold on, we got both socialism and libertarianism are at equal risk of falling rapidly into totalitarianism due to their trust in the nature of man. Libertarianism is more fragile. It's like guru selling New Age enlightenment. Yeah. That's an interesting point that you made, though. I would have to think about that more.
I've given you the historical definitions. I have engaged with you, Tick. I have watched hundreds of hours of your videos, and I've watched all the content you've made on your politics, including the longest one, repeatedly before unsubscribing. I respect you as a content creator and for how you engage with your community, like you are in this conversation.
Yeah, this is clearly a guy who did not realize the kind of brain he was dealing with. He was like, I just like videos about tanks and the Battle of Stalingrad. I'll watch this guy. And then he becomes increasingly horrified by what he's supported and subscribed to for years. Like, God, that's got to be a hard pill to swallow. Just realizing that this person is a total idiot and you thought that he was offering something valuable, and just feeling emotionally crushed by that. And now he's at the mercy of this guy emotionally because he's like invested himself slightly into this dude's channel, enough to watch hundreds of hours of content. And so now it's like he's at the mercy of this guy, and he's like begging him, please don't be as stupid as I think you might be. Please let me see that there's something in you that can rationally observe information and synthesize proper conclusions. Please demonstrate something, because I don't want to believe that you're this stupid. And then Tick drops this fucking video on him to just dash all those hopes on the pavement. Like, oh, you thought that I was going to be smart? Nope, nope. I'm going to double down harder than you've ever seen. I'm going to fuck you in the ass with my giant fucking big brain dick. Whew. I feel bad for this guy. He really got played.
I've heard you out. I just disagree. The argument just doesn't hold water. Yeah, the argument I didn't make, but you think I did, doesn't hold water. You didn't hear me out. You let your emotions cloud your judgment, and you misheard what I said. You don't disagree with me, you disagree with the straw man argument you're pretending that I said. And for this reason, I don't believe that you watched my videos repeatedly before unsubscribing. If you did,
and now he's offering extra disrespect, like you were never even a fan from the beginning. Like, wow.
Ears were open.
How classy. This guy's really classy, isn't he?
But your mind was closed. More likely you weren't listening.
Oh my god, the blue pill. You were taking the blue pill. Your eyes were closed the whole time. You weren't seeing what was right in front of you.
Or were seeing what people were writing in the comments or on Reddit or on other YouTube channels and jumped to conclusions about what I was trying to say rather than what I actually said. Hundreds or thousands of other people managed to watch what I said and didn't come to the conclusions you've made, yet somehow you did.
Those people watched this video and like lazily kind of took in some of the information and were like, oh, that sounds alright, right? I'll give it a like. These were not people who actually analyzed the video. Like when you actually think about what you're watching, then it's like, oh, this doesn't make any sense.
Did. I don't know how you did this, and you're not the only one, but you're wrong. Now, another point that I said in these videos, but need to clarify because a lot of people seem to miss this, is that corporations are states. They're not the central state, although they might be.
I don't agree. It's obviously not any definition that people have used historically. Maybe it's his personal definition. I don't agree with it on either an historical level or just a basic level.
But they are states by themselves. The definitions of all the words we've used so far makes this clear. They are means of production that are publicly owned.
Wait, what does that have to do with state, though?
Therefore are democratic and socialist.
Okay, yeah, I mean, they're... All right, I'm not even gonna bother. He's just like he's just descending into just a mush-mouthed mess of jumbled thoughts that are just scattered around his brain at this point. Like this is lacking whatever coherency it even had from the beginning.
They're not private. By society's own rules, once they're on the stock exchange, they're no longer private.
I am so glad I decided to watch this. Like, this is going to be the best clip to put on my channel, because this is just total fucking ass from start to finish. It's the best. I love it. I love it too much.
They've evolved or leveled up from private to public, and have thus become mini-states in themselves. If a tribe can be a tribal
Total unadulterated failure of the human intellect.
state, then how can a corporation with thousands of employees not be classed as a state? It makes no sense.
This is like a hidden gem. It has 100k views, but I feel like I haven't seen people talk about this guy. This guy is a gem, dude. These videos are so entertaining.
Sense not to class them as a state because there's nothing private about them. Yes, they might have a CEO, an individual who runs the show, but the show itself, the body of the people, the body of the nation, the corporation, is public. He is the public representative of the public corporation. He's not private, and he's not privately owning the corporation. Public corporations aren't private, and therefore aren't part of the private sector and can't be classed as capitalist. Yet, these facts don't stop people like this guy expressing the view that
Yeah, and we've already explained why that doesn't
this
make sense.
isn't the case.
So there's
Definitions
not
from
much left to say
Oxford
here.
Languages. Private enterprise equals business or industry managed by independent companies or private individuals rather than being controlled by the state. Yes, a private enterprise isn't controlled by the state. But we're not talking about private enterprise.
There's a difference between the term private property as used in Marxism and the term private business as used within the capitalist framework. But understanding the context of how terms are used is not what this guy's strong suit is. This guy's like, remove every term from anything resembling context.
We're talking about corporations and big businesses. That's where you've gone wrong. Private sector equals is the part of the national economy that is not under direct state control. Correct. But we're not talking about the private sector. We're talking about the public sector. Free market equals an economic system in which prices are determined by unrestricted competition between privately owned businesses. Correct. But we're not talking about a free market or privately owned businesses. We're talking about publicly owned businesses
which are
and
part
the
of private property.
Market. Capitalism, an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. Correct. But we're not talking about private ownership of trade and industry, we're talking about public ownership of trade and industry. Big businesses and corporations that are independent and not controlled by the state are, by definition, private enterprises and part of the private sector. No, corporations are publicly owned. They aren't independent of the state, the government creates them. And they are states in and of themselves. They are public. They are not private enterprises, and therefore are not part of the private sector. Okay. They are monopolies created by the state. Corpse, body, organ, organs of the state. Bodies of the state, bodies of the people, corpse, video. So if you guys want me to make a response to him, I can do, but
I want you to keep making response videos for as long as you live, because these have been excellent.
Maybe it's not worth it because he probably won't listen to me anyway, since as a dialectical materialist, he doesn't believe that anything exists.
Oh, this is a new point. Okay. A new point of stupidity, because I was starting to get tired of him rehashing the same stuff over and over, but this is This is this is new one. I haven't heard the dialectical materialist don't believe anything exists thing before. That's a new one. I would love to have any kind of explanation for how that makes any kind of even backwards sense in this guy's worldview, because that's like, even when you look at the word, like the word materialist, the word materialist has material in it, which implies that things exist in a hard, fast sense. So, wow, the being a dialectical materialist means you don't think anything exists. That is that is something. Okay. Does he try to sell us a class to get rich on YouTube at the end? Honestly, this dude should do that, because he already has so many suckers who think that he's smart and watch these videos and give likes to them. So he could probably dupe these people into buying his stupid class.
There is one counter argument that I do need to address, though, because I realised before I published the public versus private video that this might be an issue, and it was. I didn't put it in the video because I didn't think many people would notice, but it turns out they did notice, and a lot of people asked me about it. So, I said in the public versus private video that when a private family gets larger, it becomes part of the public sector. People then asked, okay, when does this transition happen? At what number of people does it happen? Like, if a group of 50 people is classed as private, is a group of 51?
Wow, they found the very obvious flaw in his very restrictive semantical reasoning. This is what happens. This is the problem with using semantics to justify your opinions, is that you can always split hairs, because that's all semantics is like splitting hairs based on definitions. And so, well, why can't I split hairs on your definitions? You can just infinitely regress into absurdity, and that's what people are doing here. They're poking him like, here's your logic used against you. So let's see how he handles this.
People public. When's the cutoff point? Is there a cutoff point? And some people asked this because they were being genuinely curious and wanted clarification. Fair enough. But a lot of people claim that because I didn't or couldn't define this with hard numbers, it proved my definitions were wrong. So, okay, I need to clarify this. At what number of people does a village become a town? At what number of people does a town become a city? You'll find that there isn't a set definition. There are villages here in the UK with only a couple of thousand people in them that are classed as cities, and cities that are classed as towns because they've not been formally declared as cities. Some have cathedrals, some don't. There are cities with fewer people in them than some towns.
So is his point that he doesn't have to define? He doesn't have to split hairs here? It's just something that you're supposed to feel out with the vibe? Well, that would be fine if he wasn't making all of his arguments about splitting hairs based on precise verbiage. Like, a family doesn't count as a state because it's too small. Well then, okay, if you're making that very precise, arbitrary distinction, then why can't we question at what point does a family get too big to be considered part of the private sector? If you don't have an answer to that, then why do you still hold to this idea that the public sector is everything except families? Like, that's the one thing that's not part of the public sector.
That wasn't really a great example of tick history, splitting hairs. Really, I mean, what I'm talking about is how he's like, oh, the National Socialist Germany definitely wasn't capitalist because the government interfered with the free market. So, like, he's creating this very, very, very restrictive definition of what counts as capitalism. And then he's like, socialism is only when the government owns the means of production. It's a very, very restrictive definition of socialism. So he's always about restricting what we're talking about to very precise things until it's inconvenient for him to do that, and then he's all wishy-washy. Now he's like, oh, well, terms are allowed to be kind of flexible. Well, if they're allowed to be flexible, then why do you insist on making them as rigid as possible? It doesn't make any sense.
And towns with fewer people in them than some cities. And the reason why is because the distinction between a village...
Yeah, my brain is going to be in recovery mode after taking in all these high-level important ideas. Carl, too, says, believers in dialectical materialist analysis of history and society don't believe in existence. My brain just exploded. Yeah, I know. It's like the exact opposite of what they believe. This guy just straight up said they believe the exact opposite of what they believe. Amazing. Amazing. See, I said before it was a scale size thing he was going for. It goes nowhere. But yeah, it's a scale size thing he's going for, but when you try to get him to determine what scale and size are you talking about, then he has no answer. Then suddenly his whole philosophy on language changes. He's like, well, really, I mean, the terms town and city mean different things, but there's no precise, dividing line. Well, then why is everything except for family part of the public sector?
And a town and a city is not set in stone. That's not my fault. That's not my...
He loves shifting the blame. He loves making everything not his fault. Nothing is ever his fault. He's always innocent. He never did anything wrong, did he?
Definitions of these things being wrong, that's just reality. And we can argue about this, and we can...
It's very dark side Phil, this kind of behavior. It's never my fault. I'm never the one who is causing my own problems. If people aren't watching my stream, it's because they are the problem.
Debate it, and maybe we can formalize the definitions in the future, but for now, there is no definition. If we take Google, it says...
I love it how a guy who's obsessed with finding precise definitions of things is like, there's no definition, so it's not my fault. There's no definition. It's like, isn't your whole thing like down to the gnat's ass defining everything and then using that as a way to conflate terms that don't actually mean the same thing?
A village is a group of houses and associated buildings larger than a...
Yeah, he's against postmodernism unless it benefits him to be a postmodernist.
Hamlet, and
that's how they always are, these people, though. Jordan Peterson is the same way.
Smaller than a town, situated in a rural area. But Wikipedia contradicts this, saying a village is a clustered human settlement or community, larger than a hamlet but smaller than a town, with a population typically ranging from a few hundred to a few thousand. Though villages are often located in rural areas, the term urban village is also applied to certain urban neighbourhoods. So it's not rural. A village can be urban. And what do you mean by a few hundred or a few thousand? Is 2,000 a few? Is 3,000 a few? Is 5,000 a few? Where's the cutoff? If 4,000 is the cutoff and a village has exactly 3,900...
This is like a totally pointless argument now. Okay, now he's on the credits.
Same principle applies to the idea of a small private family and a large public family. I don't know exactly where the cutoff point is because it hasn't been defined. That's not my fault, that's just the reality of the situation. I actually think it's because they're deliberately flexible enough terms so that they can apply depending on the situation. So,
the guy who doesn't believe in flexibility of terms at any other point in this video suddenly at the end is like, these are flexible terms and they can mean different things applied to different situations. Well, then why don't you apply that same method to every other word that you've used and created these rigid definitions for, and then used that rigidity to accomplish these propagandistic aims of yours? It's so transparent.
A family of 4 might own a farm and might be classed as private. Apparently I said Rome was socialist at some point.
I bet he did.
I don't remember when I said that.
Well, the fact that other people are saying you did means that you definitely did, because it is something that's exactly stupid enough for you to say it.
And despite asking for a timestamp, I'm still waiting.
Well, hopefully someone gets it to you, because even if they do get it to you, you'll make a response video where you just try to justify everything that you said. Like, yeah, I said that Rome was socialist, and, well, I think I was actually correct. When people told it to me, I didn't believe them because it sounded too stupid for me to actually have said it. But now that I see myself saying it, I think I was correct in saying it. It's never his fault. He's never wrong.
I've addressed the Tik thinks North Korea is a democracy argument in 2 videos now, including this one. There's also an entire debate on the political spectrum that I haven't addressed. That's
Okay. Well, that was a lot of fun. Ironically, he's being very postmodern himself, but I'm sure he blames them. They are deconstruction edging. They get right there before a point can be made and stop. Yeah, I mean, it's getting late, and the reason I'm talking quieter now is because I live in a house with other people. So I would love to keep streaming, but unfortunately, I can't. But it was a lot of fun going through this video. I'm definitely going to put this up on my channel. This was gold. I loved this one. This is just non-stop total failure of the human intellect. So much contradiction and confusion you could mistake it for absurdist performance art. Yeah, it's on that level. It is on the level of parody.